Welcome to Security Weekly's Virtual Hacker Summer Camp 2020. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this segment is Dr. Doug White. We're going to talk about the latest news with TikTok. So, Doug, I was in Wyoming last week, trying to get a little rest before I came in here. I think I worked too much. But a lot of news stories hit with this whole TikTok, Microsoft, President Trump banning TikTok. What's the latest with TikTok?
Well, the latest with TikTok is all the people. They're actually the latest story I found was that people of a certain age, which would not be you and I, were now the pollsters were finding that this may drive young people to vote. They're so upset about TikTok being banned by President Trump. And so there's been a lot of that discussion. And of course, there was also the article about that maybe the reason President Trump is after TikTok is because TikTok was the primary platform that was encouraging people to register for the president's rallies and then not attend. So there's all this political maelstrom around why Donald Trump wants to ban TikTok in the first place. Is it really because of China or is it really something else? And of course, then there's the whole thing about, well, it's because of China. And so it's a political Cold War strike against the People's Republic of China because that is who owns TikTok. So that's kind of where it is right now.
Yeah, when I was looking through the news articles, there are a couple, I think, security privacy concerns with TikTok potentially. Anything that the Chinese government has access to, like any company owned, they have to give that data to the government. So, I guess they're grabbing user information, potentially location information. So I think there is a concern that it could be used for some sort of counterintelligence activities, right? Now, whether you care about the consumer side or not, let's say that a government employee has TikTok on their phone and they're using the app, does that potentially put us at a national security risk? I think that's one of the main concerns that's out there with potentially having TikTok out there. It is collecting data, and that data is now available to the Chinese government.
Well, I completely agree with that in one way, which is that, yes, it is owned by a Chinese company in China, which means that the government can intervene. I completely agree that any of these kind of tools might be used if military personnel are using GPSs. There was a whole row a few years ago about Fitbits being used to trace U.S. military personnel and mapping out military bases because they were running around the military base or whatever. So they were getting all these maps. And so certainly the issue that China could be extracting data from TikTok has denied this repeatedly, although denying it is just a part of the process. China can intervene. They can send a political officer down to your company and say, give us all your data, and you don't have any choice. There's no court process on that. But I guess the flip-flop on it is that there are hundreds of applications on the Apple Store and the Google Store that are owned by the People's Republic, by companies in the People's Republic of China. So if you're going to ban one, you almost have to try to ban them all, which makes singling out this one single application kind of like, is that going to really do any good? Because somebody will put up Nick Knock tomorrow, and Nick Knock will be the very same kind of thing using the same technology, and everybody will be using it. So what do? Ban that too?
Yeah, and I think, what does a ban even look like? How would you ban an application? Because I guess you could ban it for certain governmental use, maybe, right? Yeah. If you think about an executive order coming down from the President of the United States, he could say, look, it's not allowed to be installed on any government-issued devices. That's one way to do it, right? But a global ban would, I think, be really difficult unless you got Apple or Google to remove it out of their Play stores, right?
Right. And so what I was reading about that earlier today, and basically where we are is that, yes, so the president could ban federal employees and military personnel from using any given app. So they can just say, you're not allowed to have this, and then you're not allowed to have it. Banning it from the average citizen is really, really challenging because if they try to ban it under some of these military rules, like they banned Huawei and ZTE, um, they're banning actual things like chips and boards and things like that. Banning an app, the only way they can actually do that is they would have to say, they would have to somehow try to force Apple and Google to remove the app from the App Store. And it's not clear what the legal path is on that. What I was reading was that's probably going to result in a legal fight because it sets a precedent for the federal government intervening in the behavior of companies in a non-national. They'd have to somehow try to put this in a national security perspective, and it's not clear exactly how they're going to do that. And then all of a sudden, there's all this other stuff that would fall under that very far-reaching kind of thing. So it seems like at this time that this is probably more bluster than fact, that an actual ban of TikTok that would reach out into everybody in the country would be very, very difficult to A, even do, and B, if they did it, I'm not sure how on earth they would enforce it.
Yeah, and it created some very interesting news articles from Microsoft because Microsoft was looking at buying the U.S. Subsidiary of TikTok or something like that. They put that on hold, but then I saw again today, Trump put a 45-day delay on the ban, and now Microsoft's trying to complete the transaction by September 15th, which is, guess what, right inside that 45-day window. So I think that's interesting is Microsoft kind of walked away, he delayed the ban, and now Microsoft's trying to fast track the acquisition of at least the U.S. subsidiary. And then that changes the whole dynamics, doesn't it? Now that it's owned by a U.S. company?
Well, it's all. I mean, that dynamic is actually already there because the ByteDance that owns TikTok actually has many presences in, or whatever you want to call it, in the United States already. And there are thousands of employees that work for this company in the United States. So I was reading this one article about the legality of this, and they were talking about how if he tries to say this is an entity of a foreign government, which is kind of what they would have to say, they can say, well, we're not. We're actually already have a presence in the United States. So if Microsoft buys it, and can they do that? I guess if somebody wants to sell, then it becomes a kind of function of the United States, and then it turns into this thing about, well, is an executive order against a company in the United States going to be enforceable? Is it constitutional? I mean, it looks to me like it's one of these things where it turns into a long legal battle that probably goes way off out into the future somewhere. And so I don't really understand. Everybody I read basically comes back around to the same thing. A lot of this is bluster. An executive order may or may not actually accomplish anything in this case. It's just so they don't know. And now this 45-day delay thing is a news cycle game. So it's like I said I was going to do something, maybe I can't actually do it. So now I'm just going to stall till everybody forgets about it.
Or Microsoft buys it, it becomes a U.S. entity, and then maybe then he can't do anything with it. It'll be interesting. Any predictions on how this ends?
My prediction on it is that it just sort of ceases to be an issue. I don't know why they would sell this to Microsoft unless Microsoft did some poor business decision, in my opinion, in buying something for an outrageously inflated price. I mean, I guess if they came to me and said, we're going to buy your product whether you like it or not, I'd say, okay, give me $1 billion, and or maybe it's worth more than that even. I don't even know what TikTok is valued at. And I don't understand how that would work anyway. I mean, if Microsoft buys the American component of it, do they change the name of it to MS Talk or something or whatever? And then people keep using TikTok, or does TikTok cease to exist in China? Do you move all the servers out of China? It just seems like something that's going to be one of these much ado about nothing things. Everybody gets up in arms for a couple of weeks, and then everybody goes back to making TikTok videos, and Microsoft says, why were we going to buy this? I don't really, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, look, I don't use a lot of social media personally because I don't trust it. And if you're going to single out TikTok, I'd single out Facebook and a few others that have been egregious with privacy as well. And so I don't think you do something broader necessarily. So maybe this just kind of dies by the wayside.
Everybody that seems to think that this is either just something extremely petty, and I don't want to get into the politics of it on one side or the other, but that it was something extremely petty, or it was just a shot fired in a Cold War that's a kind of like one of these threats where it's like, look what I might do if you don't do this, because I could really disrupt a lot of business operations. I mean, India basically tried to ban all this stuff as well, and it's not clear how well that's working or if it's working at all. But the bottom line is, if you ban TikTok, everybody will just move on to another thing. And if you write an executive order that's so far reaching that it says anything that violates Americans' privacy, I mean, who does that apply to? And how do you enforce it? And we don't have a great firewall that we can just block China like China has on their end. And it doesn't work there either. Because I was watching Netflix videos in the People's Republic of China, and a guy walked up to us and said, how are you getting Netflix? And I said, I'm using a VPN. Right. So if they block it, will it actually get blocked, or will that just actually make it worse, because then we have no control over it at all? So I don't really, I think it's just one of these, it's a tempest in a teacup, and in 45 days, no one will care anymore. There'll be some new thing.
Does this force us down a broader privacy discussion? Europe with GDPR, California's done it with CCPA. Does this now require us to think about U.S. citizen privacy as a broader legislative discussion? It's gone nowhere at the federal level. I'm just curious, does this spark the interest?
Wouldn't that be great? I wish. I think there's so many things going on right now that you're going to find that there's a lot of reluctance on everybody's part to start digging into these bigger issues that we face as a civilization. I wish, and maybe it will in the long run, because there's a huge thing there in terms of, as you say, Facebook, Google, and all these people tracking everything that you do, and people not wanting to do that. But I don't know that anybody's going to take that up in the short run, because I think based on the issues that we have going on with the pandemic, with the Cold War, with the election, with the Russians, with the Chinese, et cetera, I'm not sure anybody in Congress is going to be willing to take that up before, November 15th.
Yeah, and
November 3rd.
Yeah, and probably not until January after.
Probably not until January 20th, when somebody has a clue, about the next session of Congress in January 20th, 2021, when now we know who the new president is, what the new Congress looks like. So, I mean, things could change or not by then. And I think with the pandemic and the trillions of dollars we're spending right now just trying to deal with that, I don't know that anybody wants to put any kind of strict rules in place. But wouldn't it be great if we could do something about that?
It would indeed. Doug, thank you for joining me for this interview segment.
Anytime.
And we'll come back with one more news segment yet today.